Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And today, I'm back in Hanoi, Vietnam. Please welcome our guest today, Alan Adamson, author of Seeing the How, and also one of our 20 winners of the Best Business Minds Book Awards. Alan, welcome.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I really enjoyed your book, and I'm recommending it to my students. I think it's a fabulous book for understanding the markets and how to take advantage of them. So let's start off with you telling us about your professional background.
Well, I started off thinking I was going to be a filmmaker, and to be a filmmaker, you need to be incredibly talented, lucky, and be willing to starve for a while. So I went off to business school. And then I started in advertising, because at that point you had to make small films, 30-second commercials, 60-second commercials. It was a good place to learn how to communicate and capture ideas. Later went off to Unilever, where I was in the client side and brand management. And then I went back and spent a fair amount of time at a company called Landor, which was a global brand consultancy. And so I've had both client and agency experience.
So why did you write this book?
I wrote it because when I got into marketing in the galaxy far, far away in a time long ago, the focus of marketing, which is still true today, was about asking a customer what they want. Mark, what do you want? I want a better tasting soft drink. You go to the lab, you make a better tasting soft drink, and you say, ta-da, we have a better tasting soft drink here. It was always about the product. And most of my time at Unilever, we were looking at the product, how to make it work better, meeting with people in the lab, engineering. It was very product focused. But if you go into any market today and try to tell the difference between one soda or one cereal and another, it's really hard. The product differentiation is going away. And to be successful, you no longer can just ask the consumer, because they don't know what they want. They have everything they need. And so I felt that marketing needed to reset. Instead of taking a product from engineering or the lab and saying, here, I'm going to go help make it relevant to somebody, a good marketer needs to really be observational and be understanding their consumers, not so much, how they buy the product, but what do they do? How do they think? And if they're the best people that are closest to the customer and really seeing how their customers are living, they should be, yes, still doing marketing, helping make their current products more appealing to the right target. But they should also be the eyes and ears of a company saying, here's what is on the customer's mind. Here's what they're struggling with. Here are their pain points. Here's what they're unhappy with. Let's do something more to address that. So pivoting a little bit from marketing and leaning pretty strongly into innovation. So that's what caused me to write the book, because in a world of limited differentiation, just being a better marketer is no longer sufficient. You need to help your company and your organization innovate and change what they're offering to consumers, not just try to get them to buy more of it more often.
I taught at Wharton for 10 years, and my students who worked at P&G said that was the P&G model, what you just described, that they've been doing this for a very long time and doing it well.
Yeah, and it still works sometimes, because that was a success for P&G. They'd ask people, what problems do you have? And they say, well, when I'm mopping the floor, the dust flies all over. So they go to their development people, they test a concept, they find out this certain cloth, attracts dust. They make a product, they name it Swiffer, and boom, they have a success. But those situations are fewer and fewer apart and harder to get. More often than not, they're making a product like Pantene. They have 25 versions on the shelf, different, fine hair, thick hair, curly hair. They all smell roughly the same, but right next to it at a store are 20 other shampoos from 20 other companies that all come in the same packaging, all have the same benefits. And if you took somebody in their shower and said, here are 3 shampoos, wash your hair 3 times, and tell me which is the best, it would be unlikely they would come out with the answer.
So what interested you in went from filmmaking and I'm sure you envision yourself as the next Martin Scorsese. What interested you in marketing?
What I liked about marketing, and I'll tell you a quick story before I get too far, is that you more often than not have to solve conceptual and nonlinear problems. If you're an accounting firm or a financial firm, an Excel spreadsheet or the facts, the numbers add up. And if you have a issue, the numbers will tell you 64% of people don't like this, fix it. Don't do this, fix it. In marketing, it's not that simple. You have to solve conceptual nonlinear problems. I remember I did my junior year abroad when I was in college in Europe, and I came back and I went to the Department of International Studies and I said, "How's the program going?" I said, "Well, yeah, we're having trouble getting students to want to go over and study overseas." And I go, "Why? It's a great semester. It's roughly the same tuition. You learn so much by living in a different country," as Mark, yeah, I'm sure you're enjoying now
Yeah,
in Hawaii. And they say, "Well, look, we give them all the facts, but people are not going." And so it was a non-linear problem. You couldn't just say you should study overseas because you hear the facts and here's the university and you'll, go to this cafe and you'll meet different people. It was a non-linear problem. You couldn't just tell somebody here are the 10 reasons to go. And that got me interested in solving problems that don't have simple answers, that required not just asking a customer what they want, but observing them, thinking through, what about this? What about this? And that's what got me interested in marketing. It was, yes, strategic, yes, analytical, but you needed a bit of creativity to solve the problem. You couldn't just enter all the variables in an algorithm and have it pop up the answer.
I think it intellectually interested you, and it was never going to be boring, and it isn't boring. Even today, it's
Yeah, I mean,
still
I can work for, 10 companies selling insurance, and they each have the same problem, but they're each going to need to solve it in a different way, what's right for their company, right for their culture. And the minute you try to copy someone else, you're not going to succeed. Sometimes you can outdo them because execution matters. But the only thing for sure is the way you solve your next insurance brand, marketing challenge has to be different than the one you did before.
So what's your definition of marketing? Because so many people don't quite really understand marketing. So what's your definition of it?
I think it's figuring out what's relevant and different about your product, because as I said earlier, you can't just tell them, buy this soap because it contains these 20 ingredients and it's hyperreally. It's not a fact. What's relevant and different to what target, picking a target and connecting it to something about your product that is relevant and different, and then communicating that clearly to that target. The theory is simple, it's become much more difficult to do. But I think a marketer's role is not to just take the product and say, here, do you want this? And it comes in a shiny box. A marketer's role is to really understand who is the most likely customer and how can we tell this story, the brand strategy, tell somebody they should buy this product because of a focused, singular idea that's going to resonate with that audience. Yeah, that's right. I want that because that either meets a functional need or an emotional need. Do you have a better one?
No, I think that hits the spot. Every right brain-oriented leader wants measurable results from their marketing spend. How realistic is that?
More and more today, you can track what's working and what's not in real time, as opposed to finding out that you shipped a whole bunch of product and it's still on the shelf. But because many, many decisions are made emotionally, and the market is changing so fast, I would think it's half you can predict and half you can't predict. Because if it was completely rational, marketing wouldn't exist. You would have, your chat GBT would be able to market every product. It's sort of like the movie business, going back to where I started. I'm fortunate enough to work with Sony and Columbia Pictures a couple times. And you could have the same star, the same ingredients, the same director, the same packaging, and a script by the same writer, and put it together. And even though it was a blockbuster a year ago, it will be a complete flop the second time. So, and I think a lot of that's true in marketing. just having the right stuff and putting it together in a logical fashion, will work once, but it's not replicable, and it will become, you get into diminishing returns. All of a sudden, someone else figures out, yeah, Mark said he really wants a shaving cream that makes his skin soft, but I bet he really wants a shaving cream that makes him look younger. So we're going to launch a shaving cream that makes people look younger. Even though you would never ask for that in the consumer group, you'd say that's ridiculous. Most people, when you're asking them what do they want, they'll say whatever they heard in the last ad. When I worked for Procter and Gamble, we were in the dishwashing liquid category, and when you ask any consumer what they wanted, they played back, Colgate Palmolive's ad saying, "I want dishwashing liquid that's good for my hands," and that was the number one reason for it. Until somebody at P&G said, "Gee, I've been watching people in the kitchen. And, when they get grease on plastic or grease on a pan, it really pisses them off. And if we could solve that problem, that's going to be a more important benefit to talk to them about than how nice your hands smell." And sure enough, they went to Ivorydale. I think that's where one of their labs is. And they worked for 5 years, 8 years, spent a lot of money, not as much as putting, a person on Mars. And they developed this product that solved the problem with grease and dishwashing. And they went from nothing in the marketplace to the leader for 20 years.
You mentioned how Uber was a disruptive business, and no doubt we love the app. The taxis pay protection money, though, to the local and state governments by buying these medallions that you see in New York. Would Uber exist if they had to pay $100K to $2.5 million per car for the right to ferry people around? I mean, is that technology that much different, or they just got a great edge because the government didn't do anything about it, and then they grew to be so big and so many people paying taxes because of their driving these cars that the government didn't bother protecting the taxis?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. No, of course they would not be able to, because their whole business model is a two-sided market about putting, available drivers together with available customers, which sounds easy, but we'll come back to that in a second. But the taxi industry was protected, and the experience was going downhill in most markets. You arrived and you went into a local taxi. You often felt like you were putting your life at risk. The cars were old, the drivers were crazy. And so they were ripe for disruption when the technology came across. Now, Uber has the other challenge is, without owning the employee or without true employees, they're just contractors. They have struggled with making sure that when you get into an Uber, it's safe. They can control the experience. It's going to be a good experience. But the real challenge for any two-sided market is the one that Uber has managed to solve, and several others, which is the hardest one, which is when you want to ride, is there going to be an available driver there to get it? So when you come out of the big football game and there are, 5,000 people, 10,000 people, 15,000 people on their phone saying, "I need a ride home." Uber's invested a huge amount in technology to make sure they know when that happens. And in advance, they're going to be out texting or communicating with all their potential drivers. Of course, the rate goes up, so more people want to drive. So when you come out of the game, within 5 minutes, you can get in a car. So it's managing that supply and demand now that's a challenging part of a two-sided market. But they would never have gotten into business if they had to hire people. But they also wouldn't have gotten into the business if the taxi industry was providing a great customer experience. And to some extent, they weren't. So, like many categories, disruption happened. People, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is the way we've done taxis in this city for years. And these people have bought the license. And that if it ain't broke, don't fix it problem is when an entrepreneur or an innovator can jump in the market.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the taxis, Philly used to have 550 taxis. Now we're down to close to 200 taxis. But now a taxi is less expensive than an Uber.
Right. And now,
when you're picking up.
I was just out. So the worlds are merging. So I was just out I live in New York City, and I was trying to get, because I like to support the local taxis, and I was trying to hail a taxi on a corner, which is still possible in New York City. And all of a sudden, the taxi stopped, and I said, "Oh, great, that was easy." And the window came down. He says, "Are you Bob?" I go, "No, I was just hailing." "No, we have an app now picking up Bob, who's just down the street. So in other words, they are now getting the Uber technology. So if you need a ride, you have the ability to summon anybody on the car. So, I don't think they're going to be a challenge for Lyft and Uber because they have scale and they have other benefits. But they are realizing if they had done this, obviously 10 years ago, it would have been a rougher road for Uber to come in or Lyft to come in and take over the market.
How do you build, as Peter Drucker talks about, build a deep relationship with your customer? Because, back years ago when Peter Drucker wrote that book, people actually liked interacting with marketing people and taking surveys. I mean, they almost like felt privileged. But now people are so inundated with requests through their phone, email, phone, computer, everything. How does a marketer manage to, without going over the line with customers, develop that deep customer relationship?
This was one of the things I did another book before, Seeing the Alcohol Shift Ahead. Why do companies, that are hugely successful vaporize and go out of business? Not necessarily taxi, but other companies. And, when you talk to those companies, they always say, oh, we're very customer centric. We care about our
Everybody.
customers.
Yep.
That's their favorite word. But when you ask them how they find out about the customer, they, oh, I read an online survey, or we did a piece of research and I looked at the executive summary and we asked 5 questions. And you realize that over time they become complacent and are not really close to customers. I worked with a large pizza chain many years ago, and they did research. They showed it to us, and they said, people think our pizza is a 9 out of 10 on taste, and they really love our brand. And I said, well, great. You ask them how well they like the pizza, how much they love your brand. And the research team we were working with said, well, why don't we ask them another question at the same time? If your company went out of business, what would they do? And all of a sudden they found out, I don't care. I would just go across the street to the other chain. They found out that even though they were telling you good things about the product, if you disappeared, they really didn't care. You were a commodity. And so, it made them wake up. And I think part of the challenge is they're doing the work for Seeing the How. One is you get into your overschedule, as you said. You're just going from one meeting to another, and you're losing touch with your customer. You can't always delegate that. 2, you become less. You become less curious. You have less what I call fresh eyes. I used to work for many clients, and we go in there and we say, well, how do you sell your product? How do you market your product? What's important to your customers? They go, look, we've been in the beer business for 20 years. We all have. We all went to the same university. We all hung out. We know how to sell beer. This is how you do it. And they're so set on this. They lose they're so zoomed in. They lose their fresh eyes. And somebody comes into the room and says, what happens if you gave beer out there, you sold beer this way? Oh, no, that one there. So most companies get so hardwired into, this is our business, this is who our customer is, this is why they buy the beer, that by the time, they are playing the game. I had a conversation with a former client who's now a senior executive at LVMH. And he says, the players at the table are all playing the same game. You're competing against this beer company. This is how you do it. But then somebody looks at the playing field from above or from a different angle and says, isn't that strange? They're all doing the same thing. Why don't we try something different? And I think part of the challenge is, how do you keep, your curiosity going with customers? And how do you constantly try to look at them with fresh eyes? And it's really hard to do in a time crunch world. But Peter Drucker is right. Most people say they're customer centric, and they'll maybe ask them how happy you are. But the best marketing, as you know, Mark, comes from observing people. Mark, that's interesting. You tell me why you did that. Oh, I noticed, and observing people's behavior, you'll get many more insights than if you ask them what do they want in a smartphone and what do they want in an app. You'll get 90% of what you already expect if you just ask them. But if you ask them why, and maybe show them, have you ever thought about not hailing a taxi and doing this and maybe using your phone, and here's how that might work. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
I used to, when I did marketing strategy for clients, I would ask a series, maybe 5 or 6 questions, no more than 10. One of the questions I'd ask them, what's the best way to market to you? And they'd give me some bullshit answer that they wouldn't want to hear. But if I asked 3 questions later and I said, if I put you in charge of marketing, how would you market this product or service? Once I said I put them in charge, then they felt like if they didn't give me a good answer, they were embarrassing themselves. And I found that the answers they gave me were so on spot on that I was able to use them. Over time, I saw that that was the best way to get the most accurate answers for me, that they really told me the truth. Because then they wouldn't tell me, oh, I would use a newsletter or whatever they were going to do. They didn't tell me any of the things they just told me 2 questions before. They narrowed
Right.
it down to 1 or 2 things.
And then you got to get over the other one, which I talked about with your shaving cream that makes you younger. You have to find out what they're thinking, that they feel silly telling you, that they feel embarrassed telling you. You know, we did some work for Old Spice many years ago, and we would ask teen boys, you know, how long do you spend in the morning, you know, getting ready for school or getting ready for the day? And the answer, you know, oh, nothing, you know, 4 seconds. I would, you know, take my hands, wet them, put them through my hair, and I'm out the door. And so
Yeah.
that was their answer. Of course, when we watched them through a camera, which they signed up, you know, they were in the bathroom for 20 minutes, you know, getting every hair right and, you know, brushing their teeth 5 times, but they would never tell you that answer. So, you know, part of what makes, you know, and more in a world we live in, as most of your listeners undoubtedly know, there's very little meaningful product difference between one and the other. And so to really get advantage, you have to understand the emotional dimension. And you may not have to hit it off. You don't have to say, because if you said to the same kids, this is the brand that, you know, that will help you get ready in 20 minutes in the morning, no one would buy that. They don't want to be, oh, I don't need that. You know, but you know, so you have, it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, I think that they probably think their girlfriend takes that long to do it, but
Right,
not them.
right.
What's the difference between experience economy and experience innovation?
To me, experience economy was a lot about adding on an experience to an existing, you know, product that would change it. So when Nike first did the Nike store, all of a sudden it was more than a traditional shoe store. You went in there and it felt exciting, and it was bringing a bit of sizzle into the retail. But to me, experience innovation is looking at 2 things. One is the first focus of See Now is saying, zoom out. Your product is good. Keep on trying to make it better. Don't take care of it. But if that's all you're worried about, you're going to lose the game. You have to zoom out and say, how do people learn about the product? How do they use it? How do they return it? What happens if there's a problem? And can you innovate around that customer journey? And to me, the customer innovation, experience innovation is looking at the entire journey and saying, what can you do to make that ownership experience better? I mean, the classic example is, you know, if you look at research, I'm sure people say, I buy the iPhone because it has a better screen and a good battery life. But ultimately, you know, why Apple is still killing it is not because their pixels are 10% brighter than Samsung's. It's because when you get on the phone with Apple Care, they will spend time with you to figure out, you know, Alan, you know, you should have done this. Or if you have a problem, you don't have to call somebody in Hanoi. No.
Yeah.
You know, you can walk into an Apple store and somebody in a blue shirt will say, Alan, let me show you what you're doing wrong here. Oh, yep, your phone is broken. Here's a loaner. You know, come back in a couple hours, we'll have your phone fixed. So around the experience is where the differentiation happened, because there is no more room on the product. You know, I worked Unilever on many brands, and when, like P&G, when they came up with Dove, it was a better product. It was better for your skin. For years, it had a massive product advantage, and they could advertise and market it. But today, there's no more sustainable competitive advantage. If you come up with a better mousetrap, you can be sure that within 3 weeks, a month, maybe 2 months, somebody's going to match it. and more likely somebody's going to beat it. So if you try to build your whole marketing and brand story around a product difference, you can't even, figure out step two because the market has changed. So you have to zoom out and try to say, how can I build something? Because it'll be harder for now for Samsung to knock out 150 Apple stores and hire people and teach them how to, that's a still sustainable competitive advantage. Who else can put a smartphone and a screen together for less money? It does 99% of what the iPhone does. Lots of people.
That's right. Um, why did Maxwell House and many other brands didn't see the opportunity Starbucks pioneered? There have always been coffee shops. What made Starbucks different?
It's a classic case. I worked on some of those coffees from that time in the world. They're still on the shelf. Is that they focused on the coffee? They focused on the product, the coffee. And Starbucks said, let's talk about the experience. It's a well-known thing. There's a work experience. There's a home, work, and we're going to be the third experience. And they took an experiential look to how you got your coffee. They did a lot of other things, right? It's never just one thing. So they zoomed out early on when everyone was incredibly product myopic, focused, and they figured out how to innovate the experience of cool music, different flavors, ability to customize it, all sorts of things happen to make it. But it's a good example of success today Starbucks is not going to drive business results by coming out with a new bean form, a new bean mix that's going to be different. They're going to win by doing, faster mobile deliveries, coming to your, many other things on the experiential side, not on the product. But it's easier said than done. And back then, I was speaking to a guy who wrote a book on experience disruption. The maximum people, they say, well, are you worried about it? No, just like, Barnes and Noble wasn't worried about Amazon because they were a small online retail. Who's going to really, buy books online? People want to pick up the book and read it. That's the way it is. Every business that falls into that trap becomes a easy target for experience disruption.
It's funny you say that because I once had breakfast with the publisher of the Inquirer when Amazon came out with its readers and the bigger readers. And I said to him, you should cut a deal with Amazon and give all of your readers an Amazon reader and tell them no longer do you have to go out and get your newspaper. You don't have to worry about getting wet. As soon as you wake up, it'll be ready for you. And he said to me, I don't see that happening. I think what's going to happen is people still like to hold papers. And I said, yeah, my mom still likes to hold a paper, but have you ever used a Kindle? And he had not used a Kindle. I said, go use a Kindle and tell me how much you like it. Because I loved it that, you could download 3 books in like 30 seconds and carry more books because I travel a lot and I would carry 3 big hardback books with me because I'm always reading. And now, of course, he had bought the newspaper for 560 million, and it sold like 5 years ago for like 57 million.
Right. And as for everyone thinks that being innovative is about having the idea first. Being first gives you an advantage because what really drives success is executing it great. The iPad wasn't the first tablet. HP had one, Dell had one. They were the first to get everything right, including how they marketed it to consumers, where the other companies were showing the tablet with somebody sitting at a desk holding it instead of their laptop. And Apple was showing it on somebody's knee in the couch in their living room. And so it's about getting the execution right. And having the idea first gives you that time. Having it last gives it not. And seeing how I talked to one of the founders of Audible. And the same thing happened to that team. Who wants to listen to a book on the headphones? Who's going to do that? And who's going to want to? And partly they started early. They optimized the technology, and of course, it's timing matters. If you're I had a conversation with the same P&G client of mine who's now at LVMH. He said, innovation is really tricky because I think it's like surfing, he said. He said, if you're too far ahead of the wave, nothing happens. you get wiped out. If you're too far behind it, you miss it. And innovation is like that. You can have the right idea at the wrong time. You just have to be ready with your activation. It has to be right. So when the timing comes, you win. And most people, by the time they see the new thing in the marketplace, be it a reader, be it a phone, be it, they're jumping in too. But the people that have been optimizing the execution to get it exactly right win. If you're late, you don't have time to iterate, to find out that they don't like this packaging, the battery life's not good enough. So part of getting out of your office and stop reading research reports is to be able to see that opportunity happen in time to figure out how to get it not 80% right, not 96% right. So when somebody touches it, they go, yeah, that seems.
Why do you think Starbucks failed with their tea shops? I mean, they launched like they tried to do what they do with coffee. They tried to do it with tea, and I think they had 160, 180 stores nationwide. And after a few years, they shut them all down because they didn't have the same success. Same brilliant people. What do you think went
Yeah,
wrong
I
there?
mean, that's what's really challenging, which just gets back to what we were talking about before. Yeah, you can have the right expertise, but if it's not the right time or you don't have the exact right thing, I think same thing happened. I worked for a craft beer company many years ago as a client, and he was successful and developed Sam Adams and big brand. And then I worked with that firm for 5 years as he tried to do the next craft beer. And he applied the same formula, something Boston, something authentic, the right label, the right packaging, and he could not replicate Sam Adams. And I think the same with Starbucks. They got it right for coffee, but that doesn't mean they can, get it right again. And if they're, if you've got it once out, to be successful in tea, you probably have to have a different DNA focus that makes it right for tea drinkers. And there's a difference probably in how emotionally they connect to the product. And so, which is what makes marketing, going back to your first question, interesting, because you can have the same, we have the same skill sets. There's really no hot water coffee, hot water tea, cups, nice people. We'll get the same blends, we'll name it, stores that have green leaves over it as opposed to beans, and maybe different music, more Zen music. Doesn't matter, which makes marketing and even experience innovation really hard to do.
Yeah, and you see that with like Keurig try to get into the soda business, and they can't break out of coffee. People
Yeah.
spend all kinds of money on coffee, but not on their soda machine. Question from the audience. So, is there a first mover advantage no longer an advantage? Taking time to get it exactly right can be a disadvantage because of timing. As AA just said, do you think that minimum excellence might sometimes be a better goal or not?
Well, the market is moving fast, and if you have companies that are saying, um, uh, perfect is the enemy of success, or if you
Yeah,
spend forever polishing your stone, by the time you launch it, no one wants it anymore. So it is a balancing act. But you can't. I think the fallacy is if you have the idea and you can just execute it, you will win. Because it's not always the case that the first one out wins. But there is a balance between, and most of the time people are polishing the stone. They are focusing on minutia. They're focusing on things that don't matter, and they're better off to launch it, iterate, revise it, iterate, and do that as opposed to keep it behind closed doors and then go ta-da and either miss the moment or find out, even though everyone thought that ta-da would work, that ta-da is not going to work. But I'm a believer that it's better to create lots of prototypes and test ideas with prototypes than ask Mark, would you be interested in a fruit flavored drink that has more vitamin C? No, here it is. Take it home. It's, super C fruit drink. Tell me if you like it. What do you like about it? And even then, you're unsure. But while you can sometimes ask people to be marketing executives, most of the time they'll be bad marketing executives.
When you worked at a highly successful packaged goods company, Unilever, what was their approach to marketing and brand building that made them successful?
They had the old formula, the same as P&G. Find a consumer need that is unmet. I want to have my skin not so dry, so if the soap didn't make it dry, that would be good. They then went to their labs. They developed the product, and in those years, they were able to ride a long curve. Once they have the better mousetrap in the market, that's when they can make they can build a brand, build a story, build line extensions. It is much more difficult today to do that. You look at any big brand. I recently I taught a class at NYU, and we talked about Heinz ketchup, and I showed them some ads, and one of the ads had people saying around the world, and look, how do you draw ketchup? And everyone around the world drew a ketchup bottle that was Heinz's bottle, even with their Heinz. And they were all excited that people said Heinz is a ketchup. And I said that's interesting. Yes, name recognition is important, but when you go to the shelf today in the supermarkets in many markets, there are 25 brands of ketchup: organic, thick, spicy, and so Heinz was able to crack into the business because they had a ketchup that was good quality when there were not that many brands. Now the market is really cluttered, and I'm sure P&G is probably spending as much time on experience innovation that if you want razors, how to get them to your house, especially in the diaper business, lots of it used to be when I worked with P&G, Pampers had a better mousetrap, the diaper worked better, it didn't leak, they had the right fits, Huggies right behind them. But now I'm sure the whole business is, how do I get diapers to that new parent in front of their door the day they run out? And how do I make this a non-issue? How do I add a feature to it? Pampers is putting in, I did this story in the book too, a device that clips onto your diaper that will tell your phone when they're wet. So you don't have to wake your kids now. So they're looking and saying, forgetting, I can't compete on which diaper is going to have less leaking. I've got to compete on how do I make the parenting experience better for babies, be it put a sensor on there so I don't wake them up when they're wet, be it have it delivered 2 days before I run out, be it have it delivered in 20 minutes if in fact I have the wrong size, be it I have a customer care person that can talk about diaper rash better than J&J. So Pampers and Unilever and P&G undoubtedly are zooming out and saying, if we're going to be in the diaper business or in the ketchup business, we better be in the entire customer journey and figure out where we're going to win. Because another principle from the book, Mark, was that it used to be if you did something good, that was great. That was better than people had. But in an interview with the New York Times columnist, Tom Friedman, he talks about the notion that average is over. If you do something averagely today, no one cares. No one, because the most important media is no longer packaging or market, it's social media. What do people share online? And the only thing for sure, if people ask me, Alan, can you give me an idea that goes viral and we need to make our brand more prominent on social media? Yeah. Well, the only thing I say is that if your product is just okay, game over. Because no one gets online and says, I bought a diaper, it was okay, the price was pretty good, it worked pretty well, the color. Yeah. It's either I bought a diaper and something terrible happened, or something, I took a flight to LA, the pilot got lost and landed in Cleveland. I'll share that. But they're not going to say the plane arrived roughly on time, they didn't lose my bags, the peanuts were okay. So if you're going to succeed in marketing today, you have to not be average, which also means you have to pick your battles. And so even on the diaper brand, while they can do 50 things on diapers, where are they going to win? And how can they really do something extraordinary? Which I thought the P&G sensor, which I think they joined forces with a tech company, is a great idea. Because if I can get this sensor clipping onto that diaper and instantly tell my phone I better change little Debbie, before, you know, I have a cranky kid. That's the benefit that matters. And yes, they'll match it. Huggies will match it. Store brands will match it. But by then, I'm sure P&G will think of the next one.
That's like I'm a type 2 diabetic and I have to prick my finger a couple times a day to see my sugar, but there are watches that are getting closer and closer to being accurate that you can
Right.
wear, and it reads from your skin, telling you all the time about what your sugar level is. And
Right.
how awesome is that, right?
Exactly.
And
I mean,
and
every innovation, yeah, you look at, if you were in the doorbell business and said, what's important for a doorbell years ago, people would have said, well, it should ring and maybe ring loud enough that I hear it upstairs. And now, of course, it's obvious that what you want is a doorbell to let you know that your package is there's something in front been delivered, or there's a guy in a mask, trying to hack into your lock. But that's why I'm a little bit in the Steve Jobs camp, Mark, which is, if you ask consumers what do they want, they have rear view mirrors, really good
right.
rear view mirrors. And to help them say what do they want, you have to put something. Would you be interested in a doorbell that had a camera? Right? And
Yeah.
but you get the right consumer and what type of camera and how many. But marketers need to take the lead there, as opposed to figuring out with the rear view mirror, how do I get Mark to buy more diapers, and saying we can put Velcro here or Velcro there. Be innovators. Force the company. Don't have the innovator be somebody in the lab who's going to develop, because lots of companies have innovation in the lab, and they'll come out, look at this great new thing. The battery lasts 2% longer, and that could be important. And they can still, people in the company and in engineering can make a difference, but marketers should step up to the table if they're really going to be closest to the consumer. They need to be far more than asking them rear view mirror questions, and far more into helping companies stop playing the same game before the game becomes obsolete.
So we have a couple questions here from the audience. So let's go with the next one. As a film guy, what's your take on Disney's recent disasters with Marvel and Star Wars? Was Disney trying to force their newly acquired fan base to accept the core Disney formula?
Yeah, I think anytime you get big and you have a bigger companies, risk becomes bigger, because everyone's there has grown up in the film business. They grew up at Disney. This worked for Toy Story. This worked for um, um, Buzz Lightyear. And you get into a formulaic approach. And the only thing for sure is the formula is going to be on this curve, and you don't know how fast that curve is going to. So I do think you get into that world, into that bubble of, and to keep a company fresh, you need to hire outside of your bubble. For my last book, I interviewed the former CEO, who unfortunately passed away very young, of a toy company. And for years, they had this toy company, I think it was Hasbro, run by toy business, who had been in the toy business for 20 years. And they brought in somebody from LA who was in the film business to run the toy company. And it was heresy. Oh my God, this person's going to fail. But that new person coming in had a different view of toys and how they needed to intersect and overlap with entertainment. And he was phenomenally successful. And I think even for big companies like Disney, bringing in people that don't have a myopic view, and diversity matters. And if everyone at your company went to the same film school, was in the same fraternity, has 20 years at Disney or 20 years at Paramount, you are very close to becoming like the New York City taxis were 15 years ago. Really vulnerable.
And then there's a lot of pressure in a big company like Disney to outdo itself all the time,
Right.
and trying to minimize the risk. And like you said, sometimes these follow-up products don't work as well, as Sylvester Stallone found out with the Expendables, right?
Yeah.
Expendables 4, the first couple drew big audiences, but as the action stars got older and the fan base started to disappear for them, Expendables 4 didn't do well at all.
Yeah, part of that is innovation. When Disney got into this end of the business, they acquired Pixar, which was a Steve Jobs startup. It was a completely different culture, a different way to make animation, and they jump-started their business because they brought in somebody from technology land to reimagine what animation could be. And I think many companies today, I think this is a challenge for marketers, are made up of people that are in the optimization business. Here's our product. We need to take cost out. This is working. This is proven. And if you're in a company, because I've spent many, many years in a big company, it's a really hard thing to go to the CEO and say, this has worked for 5 years. Look at our great sales for 5 years. But next year, we're going to try something completely different. It's going to cost twice as much. And I think it's a great idea. It's career suicide, because if that doesn't work, you go, you took a company that is working for 5 years and you told us to do something different. Right? Here's the door, here's your, little package, and good luck. And that risk averse nature, I did talk to Procter and Gamble people, and that was a challenge they're facing. That younger people coming into the market, into the company, said, well, we need to change. The CEO said, we need to be more innovative. But the people in the middle, unfortunately, who had been there for a long time, who were risk averse, they had 2 kids in college, they had a big mortgage, they were not going to walk into the CEO's office and say, the way we've been marketing Pampers is wrong. Let's figure out how to put it. That middle is risk averse, which hurts companies like P&G, like Disney. The bigger it is, the bigger the middle, the more people that have lots of options. That, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, becomes the mantra.
Yeah, there used to be a commercial with IBM, and you would see these 3 different offices of their competitors, and all of them would not try to top each other because they didn't want to take the risk that they would get fired at the end of the day. I forget what that commercial was.
Yeah.
A question from the audience. Are you saying that a lot of being second to none is creating the need rather than responding to a stated need?
So I think that question is, when you say second to none, what do you think it means? That if you just follow the leader and follow what everyone else is doing, you're going to get in trouble? Yeah, I think that's an easy game. But it's and it can often work. I mean, there are many, many companies that have gone from number 2 to number 1, or you could still be phenomenally profitable at number 2 or even number 3 in many markets. But the challenge for marketers today, I think, is the fact that marketing was built on a focus on products and having, sustainable, meaningful differentiation, and that world is gone. And so marketers need to reinvent themselves and stop going from give me something to sell and market to, all right, how do I get inside Mark's head and find out, problems he has that he doesn't want to tell me, and that what might be the next thing that he doesn't even think about when he's buying a razor or a vacuum cleaner.
Marketing professor Joe Steckel wrote, marketers should be playing golf, not tennis. What does he mean?
Yeah, so Joel and I wrote a book together, and it was Shift Ahead. And I love this story. When we were developing it, it was his idea. In that, when we look at why companies fail, tied to the question you just asked, the first one, just one previously, companies, when they're in business, get very focused on just looking what their competition does. When I was at Unilever at lunch, we didn't talk about movies that much or politics, or we were at Unilever, we were talking about Procter and Gamble and Colgate. When I worked with Pepsi, they were focused on, you see what Coke did yesterday? You see what, this brand, you get very much like tennis. When I play tennis badly, I am focused on who I'm playing. And my whole focus is, well, Mark's on that side of the court, I'm going to hit it to that side of the court. And that happens in business too. You tend to be, as I said, really focused on how do I beat the dry cleaner across the street? How do I beat this person who's doing, and you get very much, you start playing tennis. Whereas if you play golf, yes, you have to worry about how the person next to you and how he or she is doing, but you're going to be better at playing golf if you're paying attention to the wind, you're paying attention to the terrain, you're paying attention to your swing and your form. Whether your competitor is standing next to you or over there or down the field, it's not as central to your success. And so the principle there is, if you play more golf as a company, you'll be more in touch with the environment and what's really going on and changes. If you're in a business that's very much playing tennis, which many, many companies are, how are we going to take share away from Colgate? How are we going to take share away from Gillette? Then you get into a myopic and you try to beat them, and you tend to just say, well, they just put 3 razors on the blade. let's put 4 razors on the blade. No, they just put 4 razors. Let's just put a new Teflon coating on. You get into that mousetrap that says the way to win is to just outdo your competitor. And of course, as we all know, what happened to Gillette and Schick, who were playing that game, excuse me, somebody said, well, I don't care how many blades, I just don't want to remember to get it. And so Dollar Shave Club cleaned a lot of clocks and changed the game. So I do think tennis and golf is a basic way to look at your business, and it will force you to either look at the market differently or certainly be more aware of changes before they become mainstream.
In the book, you dedicate a chapter to virtual reality, and Mark Zuckerberg changed his company name and invested over $20 billion in this. You wrote about various uses. Meta has pulled back, but Google and Microsoft are still huge believers. What's your take on this technology and how best to use it, especially as marketers?
Yeah, I think what happens in marketing and many things is everyone chases the shiny new object. Somebody said, the hot thing is it's got TikTok, everyone's watching it. We got to be on TikTok, and then they do that, and then the next thing comes along. And virtual reality has been around for, Meta did it, and Samsung's played in it. Now Apple has put up a lot of money into theirs. And I tend to go to CES a lot, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas once a year. Not so much that I'm in that business anymore. I was had clients in it, but it's a good lesson in technology and where it's going and what's happening. And early on, I saw some interesting uses for virtual technology. And one of them, I had the privilege of working with Marriott, and they tried it early, which is if you're looking for a hotel room or you want to see what a hotel is like, looking at a couple bad pictures on a flat screen is one way to say that pool looks nice, that gym looks okay, the room looks okay. But if you gave somebody a chance to walk through the room or walk through the hotel, and so Marriott years ago set up a virtual reality booth in New York City, right by City Hall. Newlyweds came outside. They put them in the virtual Marriott virtual reality booth, which was surround sound, and not a headset, but a complete immersion. And they said, where do you want to go on your honeymoon? And the person said, I'd like to go to London. Well, let's go. Here's London. Here's our hotel. Here's how you walk down Piccadilly. And all of a sudden, you could see their faces. They were experiencing Marriott's property on Piccadilly Circus completely different than if they had looked through a brochure. They see 3 new pictures of the lobby. So for certain uses, the airlines, the same thing. Some of the aircraft manufacturers were using it to show what it would be like to fly business class on Singapore Airlines, and what it's like to walk into the plane and see what the bathroom is like. So I'm optimistic that for certain uses, virtual reality makes sense. And for many uses, it doesn't make sense yet.
Warby Parker, which provides glasses, and they're Wharton grads, and I knew them when they were in school, changed the way people bought and tried on glasses. What are some of the lessons we can learn from what they did? Because there's one company, I forget what the name is, but they dominate this marketplace. They practically own it. They're almost like a monopoly.
Yeah, they again, when you get to that level of success, it's never just one thing they did. They did a lot of things right. But one of the things, a great story of how one of the students lost their glasses, and back then getting new prescription glasses was a long, expensive process, and he didn't have, an extra $250 on him. But so he wanted to solve cheaper glasses. But what they really did was they worked on an insight that people didn't even talk about because it's the way it was. When you used to buy prescription glasses, you went into a store, you talked to somebody behind the counter and said, I think I want those black glasses. And they would hand you the black glasses, you put it on, look, I don't know. And you say, well, maybe I'll try the brown ones. And then they hand you. But the third time you asked, that clerk was saying, are you going to buy a pair of glasses? You look fine. Come on, Mark, those are fine glasses. This is the one you had last year. Let's get on with it. And they realized that if they could get the glasses out of the counter and let you do it yourself, and or be able to FaceTime and show. So when I went to Warby Parker the first time, I couldn't make up my mind. So I FaceTimed my daughter and said, look at, how dorky do I look? And she said, "If you buy those glasses, you will go over the dork scale. I won't be able to, I have to move out." And so, but they realized that part of that was changing a paradigm that exists forever. This is how eyeglasses were sold. And so by breaking it down, making it more social, making you could walk through displays and see how it is, as well as solving other problems, of merging the digital and uh, the virtual and real, people, realize, and they realize that while you can buy everything online, glass is one of the things you really want to feel. And, yes, you want to be able to order it or change it online, but having physical stores, much like the Genius Bar, matter when you're buying something, even at the price point Warby now sells it for. So I think they were able to look at what is and do a little bit of the old Jerry Seinfeld line, which is, you ever wonder why people go to a glass store and then somebody hands them just if you were coming at it from Mars and saw the way glasses were sold, in at least in the US, you'd say, that's strange. Why are they behind glass? Why are they in a counter? Why can't you just have them out front? And why can't you bring your friends in and have them tell you, if you wear these glasses, you're not going to the prom? Not because you don't want to go, because no one's gonna go with you. And so I do think that's the biggest challenge, and why and there were big companies in the eyeglass business, big companies. But those companies were into the optimization of the game they're in, Mark. And I think easier said than done.
You wrote about how Peloton changed the way we work out and during the pandemic, and it was one of the hottest companies out there. Now they have a hard time selling their product. What's the future for companies like Peloton in the fitness world, and what new changes do you see in that?
Well, there's going to be many HBS or Wharton cases about Peloton. One of the things that's easy in hindsight is that if you're doing many things, you can't be great at anything. If you're trying to do 10 things, if I want to be a baseball player, a tennis player, I'm never going to be great. You have to focus. And they were in multiple businesses. They were in the manufacturing business of bicycles, which is a complicated business. They were in the content business of doing classes. They were in the streaming business. They were in the fashion business. They had Peloton clothing. They were in the retail business. They had Peloton shops. And so, all of a sudden during the pandemic, everyone needed it. It was fine. They couldn't make enough, but they were doing too many things averagely. So the question is, can they get focused and do one thing great? They're starting to undo that. They're getting out of the fashion business. They just announced, one of my lenses I look through and seeing the how is joining up with others. So rather than them making the clothes work out, so now they have a joint venture with Lululemon. So when you're watching the screen, it's Lululemon clothing, and they're getting out of retail. And I believe they're now not selling bikes directly. You can get it from Amazon. So over time, I think they'll get it. Whether they'll get it in time to stop the bleeding, because I think the ultimate business they're in is going to be online fitness, and that's a brutal space right now. You have, fitness clubs in there. You have Apple in there. You have Nike in there. It's a low barrier to interest. Anyone can do a fitness class, a virtual fitness class. It's going to be a tough haul.
Here's our last question. What technologies or trends do you see coming down the pike that will change the buying experience? And what's AI's future in marketing and advertising?
Two questions. I think the thing that will that has changed and will change it is that everything is going to be much more virtual. I took my car in to get it repaired. The way I used to get it repaired, some guy would come out and say, Alan, you need this part, this hose, this thing is bad, and it's going to be $400. All right. And that's the way everyone worked until I went to the car dealership 2 years ago, and all of a sudden I get a video on my phone saying, we're underneath your car with our phone, and here are your brakes. This is wrong. And all of a sudden I believe the person, because he went inside my engine and under my car. So we're going to go, a lot more virtual. You're not going to go into a hardware store anymore without having first time, do you have this part? Everything is going to be completely virtual where you want it and completely real where you want it. And AI, who knows how it's going to work, but the biggest challenge for AI, last point, is it's going to be harder to get into marketing, harder to get into advertising, harder to get into law, because all those entry-level jobs, that you were hired for to do a research on consumers or prepare the legal brief, AI is going to do that 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper, or 100 times cheaper.
Alan, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. Love the book, and it's very thought-provoking and really gives you an understanding of what you have to think about for the future, especially for your own company, whatever product or marketing of your services you're doing. This is a book, it's a must read.
Thanks. Enjoy chatting with you, and look forward to hearing from some of your listeners.
Wonderful. Everyone, have a wonderful weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.